Good morning, YouTube. Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. So today we have an enhanced risk here and a 5% tornado threat across the Great Lakes. Enhanced risk is mainly for wind across this region. There's also the hail threat as well. Some hail could potentially be significant, but the chances are pretty low at this time, so not going to really feed into that too much. Also have a secondary marginal and slight risk area across the Great Plains. We mainly are going to be focused on McCook and Colby over towards Nebraska and Kansas. We also have other parts of central Nebraska that are under the gun here. So make sure you're hitting that like button, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button and decimating that share button. Try to get this info out to as many people as we can because there's about 40 million people that are under the gun here for severe weather. So let's go ahead and get into the models here. So looking at the 500 here, I don't know why we're at 850, but looking at the 500 here, this is where we start to really see things become a little bit more pronounced. I looked at the 200 earlier and there's not really a whole lot to show for it. There's something there, but it's not really anything for you to visually see. But right here, where we have that ridge developing, on the flank of that, there's this trough that's developed here. So with the Gulf of Mexico, this is going to force the Gulf of Mexico moisture to actually move from southwest to northeast here. So we have a surface flow going this way, and we have winds at the upper levels veering this way. So we already got our directional shear. It's a little bit of speed shear there, but it's not going to be super robust. So this isn't going to be like a large-scale tornado outbreak by any stretch. It's mainly going to be isolated in nature, but particularly across this portion of Michigan over towards Detroit is where I'm most interested right now. So I'm going to try and pinpoint this little spot here. This is contaminated, but it's within this area between 21 to 23 Z, which will be between about 5 to 7 Eastern time, probably 4 to 6 Central time is when storms will probably be at their strongest. Depending on how work goes, I may even get a chance to cover this live, but it's questionable at this time. But as far as the setup for today is concerned, mainly across the Great Lakes, I'm mainly thinking the threat's going to be wind. It's going to be mostly linear, but can't rule out a few tornadoes. There was a sounding that I looked at just before I started this video that looked pretty impressive. We might take a look at that, we may not. Depends on how much time I have left, and I have a little bit, but not a lot. Can't let it get ahead of me here. As far as the upper level setup is concerned for the Great Plains, not really a whole lot to go off of. It's not really a hot type of setup. It's typical summertime setup. You get decent dew points, you get hot temperatures, and of course with a little bit of lift you can usually get a pretty strong thunderstorm to develop. Definitely not your run-of-the-mill just quick rain in and out type of thunderstorm. You can usually get some pretty impressive stuff going on there every once in a while. As far as today's severe setup here, you can look at the shortwave beginning to develop here by 20Z towards 21 and 22Z. The shortwave becomes a little bit more pronounced. And then as time goes on, of course, as it moves off to the east, we start to get out of those most impressive parameters here off to a much weaker, less impressive setup. There is a slight risk for tomorrow across the northeast and mid-Atlantic, but we'll probably get into that video maybe tonight if I don't go live, or tomorrow in the morning. Also could see a potential for that maybe even going up to an enhanced risk. As far as the 850 is concerned, this is why I think they went with the 5% tornado threat here. Because by the time we get towards 21 to 22Z, to put in perspective, the minimum threshold for them to really upgrade a risk, usually from marginal to slight and beyond, would probably be about 20 to 30 knots. We're getting close to 50 here, so we're almost doubling that. Do I think that we will see much higher risk factors for tornadoes? Kind of leaning towards no at the moment, but of course that depends on what these weather balloons will end up bringing to the models by the time we get towards lunchtime. So just keep an eye on the weather and stay weather aware across this region here in particular. And then over here, we do get a little piece of energy that develops late at night. But by this point, I'm thinking most of the parameters that you would look for severe weather, not really going to be as abundant. So I wouldn't worry too much across this area. This is nothing that you haven't dealt with before. But for the most part, I don't expect anything crazy as far as tornadoes or anything like that. Better chance tomorrow across this region of maybe another more notable severe event going on here. But even then, I wouldn't even call that notable. As far as moisture return is concerned, we have pretty good. We have a pretty good moisture return, pretty good flow from the Gulf of Mexico here. Like I said earlier on in the video, southwest to northeast flow here. And also, I want to make note of something from last night when I made a video about corn sweat. You can actually see an example of it happening here, because this little area of spin right here that develops here, you can see on the eastern flank of it, it's causing that Gulf of Mexico moisture to go here. And then behind that, you can kind of see some of the corn sweat kind of hanging around and starting to push off to the west here, which is going to help keep things really ripe over this region. So it's interesting to see how that's developing. But moisture source is pretty good over across this region here. This is heading into 22Z. We'll click this really quickly, and there we go. Little curve in the hodograph here is a pretty good indicator of spin in the atmosphere. Other parameters look pretty solid here. EHI, storm rotophelicities. Not much of a cap here too, so there's a chance of tornadoes here. There is a little bit of contamination here, but it's nothing that isn't unheard of. So we'll see what happens with this. So definitely, like I said, if you're over towards Detroit by 21 to 23Z or about 4 to 6 o'clock, definitely want to be keeping an eye on the sky. So now we'll go ahead and go to looking at what our instability looks like. And then overall, we'll just go ahead and take a look at what our radar is going to look like here. So we get some pretty good instability here by the time we're at 20Z. So between 1 to 3 o'clock is when things are going to probably start to really change. So between this pocket right here, that's when I would expect things to start to jump off, is shortly after this point right here. So like I said, let's make sure we're keeping an eye on this as we head late into the evening. By about 9-10 o'clock my time, which is Eastern, probably can start to expect this to drop off a little bit. So this isn't going to be a long duration event, but if you happen to be in the line of fire here, just keep an eye on your warnings and make sure you're heeding them as needed, because at any point I think we could see a quick spin up, or maybe even a strong tornado. It really just depends on the convective mode, which we're going to find out right now. So we're looking at what the radar could look like. This is just around lunchtime for these guys, maybe a little bit after. I already can see our little line of storms forming. We mainly have to be on the lookout for any supercells that would form out ahead of this. So this is between 21 and 22Z, and right towards 22Z towards the south here, just off the lake. That's when we start to see a couple of supercells develop ahead of the main line. And it's right there where we have to be on the lookout for our greatest threat for tornadoes. So we head later into the evening. This is going to be a linear threat. Damaging winds are most likely going to be the threat at this point. And by the time we get towards 03Z, the storms will be below severe limits and then moving off to the east. So, like I said, it's an interesting setup here, mainly leaning towards damaging winds. But if there's any sort of prefrontal storms, I would say that the tornado threat definitely would go up a little bit. If this were to break down mostly into supercells, we could be talking some real madness here possibly. We'll see what happens with it though. I'm not trying to hype this event up too much, just trying to keep you weather aware. But if you enjoyed the video, you found it useful, You know what to do. Smash that like button, decimate that subscribe button, and obliterate the share button. It's been Tire Metal Weatherman. Stay metal, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, take care and have a nice day.